Hi, my name is Darren Doherty, and this is my deep dive into the Power BI report I created to analyze safety incidents at a fictional company, IndustrialCo. This video will be a bit lengthy, so if you've come to my portfolio looking for a brief summary of the project, you might want to check out episode 1 instead, which is only about 5 minutes long. I'll link to that below in the video description, but I promise that there's some good stuff in this video, especially for anyone newer to Power BI or business analysis in general. And let's go over the layout of my project. It's actually quite a bit larger than other projects I've done and is more of a case study. Because of that, I've broken it into several parts so that you can choose which is relevant to you. I have two videos. The first is that quick introduction and summary that I just mentioned. The one that you're watching now is a much deeper dive into the report, and I'll show you how I got the insights that I did. The other part of this case study is the Power BI report itself, which I will also link to in the description so that you can go check it out and play around with it yourself. Okay, let's go over a few things to keep in mind with this case study. IndustrialCo is a fictional industrial plant, so the data I generated myself for this project. We will also make a few assumptions. IndustrialCo is split into three physical areas, sectors A, B, and C. The plant operates on three shifts. We have first shift, which is day shift, second is evening shift, and third shift is a night shift. And we will also say that there are equal numbers of employees distributed in each sector and each shift. We will say that Industrial Co. has 4,500 employees and that each shift has 1,500 workers. So there are 500 employees working in any given sector at any given time. I did this to make the analysis easier to understand as we explore trends in the data. This uniform distribution may or may not happen in real life, and if it didn't, we could take that into account in the analysis. For example, if there were significantly more employees during first shift, we probably would expect to see more incidents with the increased activity, and we could weight our findings accordingly. But for simplicity, we will say that every sector on every shift typically has 500 employees working. Here is a quick peek at the data itself. It's a standard CSV with rows of entries broken down over several columns. To be honest, it might seem a little boring, and that's okay. This is why Power BI is very cool. It allowed me to make visuals that explain this boring data in a much more compelling way. Everything in the report was created with this relatively small CSV. Unfortunately, we are just going to be examining the end result in this video. I won't be able to show how I made the Power BI report, which would really kind of take a video of its own. That might be something I do in the future, so feel free to let me know if that is something you would appreciate seeing. What will we be looking at during the analysis? So we will go over all of the safety incidents reported in 2024, which was 500. We will dive deeper into the category of the incidents. So for example, there's a category for fire, vehicle collisions, and several others. We will look at the response times. From the time an incident was reported, how long did it take to clear, and have everyone get back to work? And most importantly, we want to investigate the data looking for patterns between shifts and sectors. We are kind of doing an audit here. If we can look at the data and say this sector experiences, say, way more fire incidents than the others, we can let the safety team know that fire prevention needs examined in that sector. Okay, let's go over to the report itself and take a look. All right, here is the first page, which is just a high-level overview of all the incidents that took place during 2024. On the left, we have this log here of every incident, and we can scroll through that to see them all. By default, it is going to be ordered by time the incident occurred, with January 1st at the beginning, but I can change that if I want. So if I want to look at the response times, I can order the log by that. I have by lowest, by highest, and just manipulate that to make my analysis easier. I'll go ahead and put it back in chronological order. On the top, we have filters, so we can look at specific shifts or specific sectors if we want. I can look at shift 2, and you can see that I only have shift 2. I can look at sector C, and I only have sector C. On the right, we have these two pie charts that break down incidents by sector and by shift, and these will also act as a filter. So again, if I want to look at just sector B, click on that, and I only have sector B over on my log. Looking at this high level overview, there is one thing that does immediately pop out to me, and that is on the incidents by sector chart. We can see that sector A has way more than the other two sectors. And remember, one of the things we established is that there's an equal number of employees on each shift in each sector. Just seeing half of them take place in one sector is pretty troubling. If we go down to our incidents by shift, it's pretty equal here. Shift 1 actually has almost exactly a third of incidents happen in it, a little bit less than shift 3. And then second shift has a little bit more, but overall, everything is fairly equal. Definitely way more equal than our incidents by sector. So nothing super alarming here. On this next page, we are looking at incidents by type and at the response times. On the left is a chart showing how many of each type of incident occurred. It's immediately obvious that we have one type, fire, which happened way more than the others. There were 98 fire incidents, and the next highest, which is hazardous chemical liquid, is only 63. After that, there's a gradual drop to the next type, but seeing that, it should tell us that something in the fire prevention workflow may be lacking. Perhaps bad equipment or poor fire prevention training may be to blame. This may or may not be expected. I mentioned that I set this project up as if I am a consultant, and that means that I have a pretty high level overarching knowledge of the industry as a whole, but I'm not intimately familiar with IndustrialCo's workflows and business practices to the same degree, to the same detail that their employees are. It might be possible that they routinely work with flammable objects much more than things that would cause an electrical danger. I would want them to make the call on that, but seeing that from the data, I'm going to want to point it out to them so that they can make that judgment. We can also use our filters like the last page, can look at a specific shift or a specific sector. And here we look at response times for incidents. The global goal for the company is to have a response time of 10 minutes or less from when the time is reported to when everyone is back to work. And we see we are actually meeting that goal with an overall average of 9 minutes and 40 seconds. However, I don't think that it's a good idea to just look at that one number and be happy with it because there is more to uncover. Let's look at fires, for example. So, this is by far the most common type of incident, and they take almost 11 minutes to clear. And that could really pull the overall average response time up. Likewise, there are a number of other incidents with very short response times, like trip and fall has a very low time, and so do vehicle collisions. What's funny about performance metrics is that focusing too much on one can have unseen consequences elsewhere. So think of it like this: if I'm a safety manager being evaluated and my biggest metric is response time, and something like the number of incidents is not weighted as severely, then maybe, I see an employee just kind of shuffle their feet a little bit and I log it. Oh man, we just had a trip fall that took 3 minutes to clear. And, that brings my overall average response time down. And stuff like that does happen in real life if you do not have good standards for performance metrics. The average response time is a good metric, I believe, but you need to make sure that it is balanced by others. And then one more area regarding response times we need to look at is this matrix down here that breaks down response times by sector and by shift. We have our global average response time of 9 minutes and 40 seconds right here, but we can get a little bit more granular and see that it's not equal everywhere. If we look at response times by shift, they are fairly even. First shift actually has exactly that 9 minute and 40-second response time. The longest, which is third shift, does exceed the goal a little bit, but it's only by 11 seconds. There is way less cohesion among sector, though. So, Sector A is within our range. Sector B is actually doing very well. Their response times are 8 minutes and 22 seconds on average. However, with Sector C, their average response time is almost 12 minutes. If we look at every single shift within Sector C, they all do not meet our goal. So, looking at that, I would want to discuss with IndustrialCo reasons for why that might be happening. One thing I can think of is it could be caused by distance. Okay, let's whiteboard this a little bit because I do love whiteboarding. So let's say that you first come into the plant, you have the entrance here, and with the entrance, you centrally located have the emergency response center there. And we have Sector A very close by. We have Sector B very close by. But then if Sector C is located almost off in a corner of the plant, and maybe there's like some kind of access road you need to take, and that access road takes 2 minutes to navigate, it should make sense that Sector C should have 2 minutes added to its goal time because it'll always have that built in just traveling there before you can even respond to the incident. However, a better solution, and what I would actually recommend, is to implement changes that fix the problem and reduce our response times. I'll look at fire, for example. And by the way, with any of these charts, you can expand to make them bigger by clicking on our focus mode. So if we're looking at fire, do we perhaps have a firefighting station between sectors A and B that gives them those really short response times? If that's the case, could we perhaps move that firefighting station closer to Sector C and not have it impact Sector A and B too much? On the next page, we examine our incidents throughout the year. The main portion is this line graph, which shows our incidents over time. And this is one of the things I really love about Power BI and data visuals in general. You can derive insights very quickly and almost instinctually just by viewing the behavior of the graph. Overall, we see a consistent dip in reported incidents at the beginning of the year, and then around May, they start to increase, and then they remain pretty high throughout the rest of the year. This suggests that something happened around April or May to cause this. So let's see if we can dig a little bit deeper and try to provide a lead or two on where to look. We can apply our filters to learn a few more things. So let's take a look at our sectors here. Right now, we currently have the overall timeline up, but let's look at the timeline for A. And what's kind of interesting to me is that Sector A, the timeline for it very closely follows the general timeline. And that does make sense. There are a huge amount of incidents that happen in Sector A. So it kind of follows that it would have a big influence on that overall timeline. Where it gets more interesting to me, though, is when we look at Sector B and Sector C. So here's B, and here is C. Let me just flip back between them a few times. And what is very interesting to me is they almost do the opposite of each other. So if you look at Sector B, when it's going up, Sector C is going down, and they follow that pattern almost throughout the year. Seeing that, it makes me a little curious. It makes me think, is there anything that rotates regularly around the industrial plant to different sectors? So that could be an employee, group of employees, tools, equipment, a particular safety manager. Is there anything that appears in Sector B in April that is not in Sector C? Or even better, is there anything that moved from Sector C to Sector B around April and brought a lot more incidents along with it? These are questions that IndustrialCo will have to answer, but analysis like this will really help them target their search. We can also change the date hierarchy of the chart. So by default, we're going to be looking at it here by month, but we can go up a level and look at it by quarter, or, and this is a little interesting, we can go down and look at it by the day of the month. And this refers to the actual day of all months, not a specific one. So like the spot here for the 10th, this is the 10th of January plus incidents from the 10th of February plus the 10th of March, and so on. Every incident that happened on the 10th of a month. Overall, there's not really a whole lot that we can extract here. Even though the numbers do go up and down, they really keep hovering around this dotted line that represents the mean. I think this kind of day of month analysis might be more helpful, maybe in sales where you want to track spending habits of customers. So, like, do they spend more at the beginning of a month when they have a new monthly budget, or at the end of the month when they need to get rid of a budget? Stuff like that. There is one obvious outlier, and that's the 31st. However, that is something that we should kind of expect for that to have significantly less because not every month has a 31st in it. We can squeeze a little more insight if we look at day of month trends by incident type, though. But one thing to keep in mind is that some of the incident types with fewer occurrences, they have a smaller sample, and that can make this kind of analysis less reliable. So, for example, if we look at one of these smaller slices, which is non work medical issue, we see these huge spikes in it, and that does look very exciting. However, you got to look at the maximum for this chart, which is just 2 compared to the bottom, which is 1. So these large spikes mean that there's only one more incident reported for that specific day of month. And that makes this analysis considerably less useful than a larger category. Let's take a look at machine injury. I would still definitely want a larger pool of data, but with double the incidents in this category, we can at least see some kind of viable trend emerging. So if we look at the first half of the month, there are way more machine injury incidents. And then around the middle of the month, it drops off pretty significantly and remains under the average for the rest of the month. So looking at that, I would have questions about the machines themselves. Maybe like, do you perform routine maintenance in the middle of every month? And that leads to safer machines with less incidents. And then as time goes on, in those periods between maintenance, does something happen with the machines to make them more dangerous? And then by the middle of the next month, we get that maintenance again and it drops off. Okay, so now we are looking at our last page of the report, and this is where we examine individual employees and the incidents they have been associated with. On the left, we have a table with all the employees who were associated with an incident, shows the number of incidents they were a part of, and we can expand for more detail. 22359, we can see had 5 incidents, and if I expand them, I can tell these were 5 vehicle collisions. Definitely a trend there that needs to be investigated. 68379 also had 5 incidents, and although they were related, they were technically 2 different types, hazardous chemical liquid and hazardous chemical gas. So when this person is around, there are lots of chemicals not in the places they should be. The table on the right is another log of incidents, much like on the first page, but this one also shows the employees involved in an incident, and there can be up to 3, which is designated by their HR ID. If I click on a specific employee, the log will filter to only show their incidents. And then at the bottom, we also have tiles where we can select a certain category if we're looking for that. I can look for just machine injury, or I could look for security alarms, and you can do multiple too. So I have security alarm selected here. I can also add trip fall, vehicle collision, and just find whatever combination makes whatever I'm analyzing the data for easier to find. Now, I don't want to go through every employee because there are hundreds of them, but I do want to show how I think this might be the most powerful page that I have in the report. Remember that we said that there are 4,500 employees at IndustrialCo? Since 500 incidents happened, that means an overwhelming majority of employees did not have any incidents in 2024. Having just a single incident is not good, but being able to focus on these employees that had multiple with this table will really help improve our safety issues quickly by helping to target the investigation. And that investigation part is very important. You can't just assume that it's the employee's fault, even though it could be. You can't make that assumption. Let's take a look at the high score, 86476, and their 7 fire incidents. That is pretty anomalous. We know that we need to sit down with this employee and figure out why fires are happening so often around them, but 86476 could actually be a very safe employee, and there might be a defect with the machinery that they typically work with. And if that's the case, that's a systems issue. If you punish or remove this employee and that machinery was actually the issue, you just lost a good employee. And the problem still exists whenever they get replaced by another employee. When we use our filtering to isolate all the incidents for a specific employee, that also helps to spot trends that are emerging. So on these fires, the time of day that they are occurring is remarkably consistent. They are all between 2 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. And this provides a very targeted place for IndustrialCo to start looking not just at the employee, but at everything that is going on at the plant at this time. What workflows are being done or machinery being operated around the space that this employee is working in around 2 to 3:30. There aren't guaranteed answers, but there's enough evidence here to check it out. Okay, I might be a little biased, but I think all of that was pretty awesome. After seeing all the things we did with Power BI, I want to briefly bring you back to see the snip of our original source data and just look at it. I don't know about you, but I think the analysis we can provide from something simple like the CSV through Power BI is pretty cool. Turning all of this into interactive visuals provides a great way to quickly and efficiently find trends, and now IndustrialCo has a much better idea of where to look to increase their safety efforts going forward. Another great thing about Power BI reports, like the one that we just saw, is that we can reuse it. If IndustrialCo logs all of their incidents for 2025, we can take our very same report and just plug in all the new data next year. The hard work is already done. The only caveat is that we need to make sure the data is formatted in the same way with consistent data types and consistent column names. But if that's the case, we will just load the new CSV next year and all the charts we just toured will adjust to show those new 2025 values. Thank you so much for watching. As this was a portfolio project for me, I hope I was able to display my own skill and experience in business analysis, but I also hope this video was informative for anyone wanting to learn more about Power BI or the business analysis process in general. If you haven't already, be sure to check out the report itself, which I linked in the description below, and feel free to check out the other projects I've done on this channel. I'm very interested in data analysis and business analysis, and I have a growing set of projects where I hope to not only showcase the skills and experience I've developed, but also provide some learning material for those newer to these topics. I can be reached by email at darren@darren.pro, and my LinkedIn is just my first and last name. I regularly post my new projects there, so connect with me if you would like to see more in the future. That said, thank you for coming with me on this journey through IndustrialCo's data, and look for more in the future.